The telegram arrived at the Philadelphia Anthropological Society on March 14, 1871, and it said something that made absolutely no sense. House discovered. No doors. No windows. People inside. Come immediately. I'm going to tell you something right now that you need to understand. When people tie ELK about Appalachia being strange, they're not talking about some romantic, mysterious wilderness. They're talking about a place where the rules we take for granted simply don't apply. And in 1871, a group of scholars learned this lesson in the worst possible way. My name is Dr. James Wicklow, and I was there. I'm writing this account in 1903, 32 years after the events I'm about to describe, because I'm dying and someone needs to know what actually happened in those mountains. The official records say our expedition encountered hostile natives and that most of our party perished from disease. That's a lie constructed to protect people from a truth they couldn't handle. Here's what really happened. The telegram came from a surveyor named William Corbett, who was mapping territory in Western Virginia, deep in what we'd now call coal country. Corbett was a practical man, not given to flights of fancy, which is why the society took his message seriously. Within a week, we had assembled a team: myself, Dr. Helena Morrison, a geologist and one of the few women permitted in academic fieldwork, Thomas Chen, a photographer whose family had come from Canton, and Marcus Webb, our guide, a former slave who knew the mountain territories better than any white man ever would. We met Corbett in a settlement called Pritchard's Creek, which doesn't exist on any modern map because it was abandoned decades ago. The place had maybe 40 residents, subsistence farmers mostly, suspicious, eyes of outsiders, in that particular Appalachian way. Not hostile, but watchful. These were people whose grandparents had pushed into the mountains to escape the coastal aristocracy, who had married into Cherokee families before the removal, who kept to themselves because the outside world had never done them any favors. Corbett was waiting for us at what passed for the town's tavern, a rough cabin that served corn liquor and not much else. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. "You came," he said, and I could hear the relief in his voice. I was starting to think I'd imagined it. Imagine. And what, exactly? Helena asked. She was always direct, which I appreciated. No patience for men dancing around their points. Corbett pulled out a hand-drawn map and spread it on the rough wooden table. I was surveying for the Virginia Land Commission, mapping property boundaries for potential men. Aerial rights. 3 weeks ago, I went up into the high hollow here. He pointed to a spot he'd marked with an X, and I found a house, a stone house, built right into the side of the mountain. Stone construction isn't unusual in these parts, I said. The house had no doors, Corbett interrupted. No windows, no chimney, just smooth stone walls forming a perfect rectangle, maybe 30 feet by 20 feet. And I could hear people inside, talking, moving around. Thomas leaned forward. How is that possible? How did they get in? That's what I've been trying to figure out for 3 weeks, Corbett said. I've been back 4 times. The house is there, the people are there, but there's no way in or out that I can find. Marcus spoke up for the first time, his voice quiet. The locals know about this place. Corbett nodded slowly. They won't talk about it, but they know. When I asked around, folks got quiet. One old woman told me to leave it alone, said it was the warning house, and that it had been there since before the settlement, since before the Cherokee, maybe since before anyone. Here's something you need to understand about Appalachia. In 1871, there were places where scientific rationalism hadn't quite penetrated, not because the people were ignorant, but because they'd experienced things that resisted rational explanation. They had a different kind of knowledge, built from generations of living close to land that was older and stranger than the neat categories WW had brought from our universities. We should have listened to that old woman, but we were educated people, enlightened people, and we thought we knew better. The next morning, we set out for the High Hollow. The journey took most of the day. These weren't gentle hills, but serious mountains, steep and thickly forested. Marcus led us along paths that weren't really paths, just gaps in the undergrowth that someone who knew the land could follow. The locals had given us a wide berth when we left, and I noticed more than a few of them making signs I didn't recognize. Not crosses, something older. We reached the site around 4 in the afternoon. The hollow was a deep crease in the mountain, the kind of place where the sun probably only shines for a few hours at midday. Dense hardwood forest surrounded a small clearing, and in that clearing, built directly against the mountainside, was the house. Corbett hadn't exaggerated. It was a rectangular structure of fitted stone, each block cut with precision that seemed impossible for the supposed era of construction. The walls rose maybe 12 feet high, meeting a flat stone roof, and there were absolutely no openings, no door, no windows. Not even a gap between stones where mortar should be. "My God!" Helena whispered. She approached the wall, running her hands over the stone. "This is incredible. The masonry is seamless. I've seen Roman construction that wasn't this precise." Thomas was already setting up his camera equipment, preparing to document the structure. I walked the perimeter with Corbett and Marcus, examining every inch. The house was exactly as described. A perfect stone box, sealed completely, built against the mountain so that the rear wall was actually the mountainside itself. And then I heard it, a voice, muff, fled but distinct, coming from inside. "Told you we needed more firewood before. Check the back room. Careful with that, it's Mother's." Multiple voices. A family, it sounded like, having a completely normal, domestic conversation inside a sealed stone box. "Hello," I called out, pressing, my face close to the stone. "Can you hear me?" The voices stopped. There was a long silence, and then a woman's voice, clear and close. "Who's there?" "My name is Dr. James Wicklow," I said. "We're from Philadelphia. We're here to help. How did you get inside? Is there an entrance we're missing?" Another silence. Then, "Inside? We're not inside anything. We're in our home." "Who are you? Why are you on our land?" I exchanged looks with the others. Helena stepped forward. "Ma'am, you're in a structure with no doors or windows. How do you leave? How do you get supplies? What are you talking, G about?" The woman's voice took on an edge of fear. "Thomas, someone's outside making no sense. They're saying things." A man's voice now, deeper. "You need to leave our property. We don't want trouble." Marcus put his hand on my shoulder, pulled me back. "Something's wrong here," he said quietly. "Those people don't know they're sealed in." "That's impossible," I said. But even as I said it, I knew he was right. The people inside weren't calling for help. They weren't confused about their situation. They thought they were in a normal house, living normal lives. Thomas had been photographing the structure from every angle. Now he came over, looking troubled. "There's something else. Look at the ground around the foundation." We looked. The earth around the house was disturbed, as if it had been recently dug up and filled in again, but not by us. The grass had grown back, suggesting the digging had happened weeks or months ago. "Corbett," I said, "when you were first here, did you try to dig?" He shook his head. "Never touched the ground." "Why?" Helena knelt down, examining the soil. "Someone's been excavating around the foundation. Recently, but not immediately. I'd say in the last 6 months. We should make camp," Marcus said. "It'll be dark soon, and we don't want to be stumbling around these mountains at night." He was right. We set up our tents in the clearing, and as the sun set behind the mountains, we built a fire and tried to make sense of what we'd found. N.D. Thomas's photographs would need to be developed, but his sketches showed the structure clearly an impossible thing, a house sealed like a tomb but containing living people who seemed unaware of their imprisonment. "There has to be a rational explanation," I insisted. "Perhaps there's a door camouflaged somehow, or an entrance through the mountain itself." "I've examined every inch," Corbett said. "There's nothing." "Then how did they get food? Water?" They'd have died weeks ago. Helena was studying her geological notes by firelight. Unless they didn't get sealed in weeks ago. What if time works differently inside? What if they were sealed in years ago, decades ago, but from their perspective it's only been a day or two? I wanted to dismiss this as fantasy, but I couldn't. We'd all heard the voices. The people inside were alive, conversing, going about their daily routines. The T was an observable fact. The question was how. We took turns keeping watch that night. During my shift, around 2 in the morning, I heard the voices again. Not conversation this time, but singing. A woman's voice, sweet and clear, singing a lullaby I didn't recognize. It was the most normal sound in the world. A mother singing her child to sleep, and it made the whole situation infinitely more disturbing. What kind of prison was this, where the prisoners didn't know they were imprisoned? The next morning, we began a systematic investigation. Helena worked on documenting the structure's construction, trying to determine how old it was. Thomas created detailed diagrams and photographs from every angle. Marcus and I interviewed more of the locals, trying to get information about the house's history. The locals remained tight-lipped, but we eventually found one man, a former Cherokee Nye, Med Samuel Swimmer, who was willing to talk, though only because Marcus asked him directly and promised the information wouldn't go into official records. My grandfather told me about that place, Samuel said. Said it's been there since the old times, before even the Cherokee came to these mountains. The ancient people built it, though he never said who the ancient people were. It's called different things: the warning house, the lesson house, the house of what will be. What will be? I asked. Samuel looked at me with the kind of patience you'd show a child. You city people, you think, you're building the world better. More houses, more towns, more of everything, all crowded together. You think that's progress. That house is a warning about where that leads. I don't understand. You will, he said. The people inside, they're not from now. They're from ahead. They're what comes. When you pack people in too tight, when you build your cities too high and your walls too close. That house is what's waiting for all of us if we keep going the way we're going. This was clearly superstition, but I thanked him for his time. Marcus, however, looked thoughtful as we walked back to Tea Camp. You think he's crazy? Marcus asked. I think he's interpreting an anomalous situation through his cultural framework, I said. That's a fancy way of saying yes, Marcus replied. But what if he's not wrong? What if he's just describing it in a different language than you'd use? I didn't have an answer for that. Back at the house, Helena had made a discovery. Using careful measurements and geological analysis, she'd determined that the stone wasn't local. This rock doesn't match anything in this region, she explained. The composition is wrong. It's sedimentary, but with properties I've never seen, and the wear pattern suggests it's simultaneously very old and very new. That's contradictory, I said. Yes, she agreed. It is, but it's what the evidence shows. Thomas had been attempting to communicate more with the people inside. He'd managed to have a longer conversation, and what he'd learned was disturbing. There's a family in there, he reported. Mother, father, 2 children, and the father's mother. The father's name is John, though he wouldn't give a surname. They've been in their house for what they say is about 3 days. They moved in recently, they told me. It's a new house in a new neighborhood. Neighborhood? Corbett said. There's no neighborhood here. I know, but that's what he said. He talked about neighbors, about the street outside, about the city growing up around them. He said they'd moved here because housing was scarce and expensive closer to the center of the city, and this was all they could afford. I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the mountain air. Did he say which city? Thomas nodded slowly. I asked. He seemed confused by the question, like it was obvious. He said the city, capital C, like the. Rio was only one, like it was the only city that mattered. We worked for 3 more days, documenting everything we could. Helena became convinced that the house existed in multiple time periods simultaneously, that it was somehow an overlap point where different eras touched. Thomas's photographs, when developed, showed strange anomalies. The house appeared slightly different in each image, as if it was shifting between exposures. I remained skeptical, clinging to rationalism even as the evidence mounted against it. There had to be a logical explanation, perhaps some kind of natural phenomenon we didn't yet understand, some quirk of geology or atmospheric conditions that created the illusion of impossibility. On the 4th night, everything changed. I was on watch again, sitting by the fire, when I heard a sound I hadn't heard before. Scratching, coming from inside the house. Frantic, scratching, like someone clawing at stone, then screaming. "Let us out, please, God, let us out." I ran to the wall, pressing my ear against it. The woman inside was hysterical. "The walls are closing in. The rooms are getting smaller. Thomas, the doors won't open. Why won't the doors open?" The man's voice panicked. "The windows are gone. The windows were just here and now they're gone." I shouted back, "What's happening? What do you see?" "The house is shrinking. The walls are, oh God, oh God." The children were crying. The grandmother was praying in a language I didn't recognize. And, through it all, that terrible scratching, hands clawing desperately at stone that wouldn't yield. The others had woken and rushed over. We beat on the walls, searched frantically for any opening, any way to help. But there was nothing. The house remained sealed, impervious, and inside, people were dying. The screaming lasted for 20 minutes. Then it stopped. Not gradually, but all at once, like a switch had been thrown. We stood in the pre-dawn darkness, breathing hard, listening to the absolute silence from inside the stone walls. "Hello?" Helena called. "Can you hear us?" Nothing. E tried for hours. No response. Whatever had happened inside the house was over. As the sun rose, Marcus made a suggestion that seemed crazy but was perhaps the only option left. "We need to break it open." Krobitz said, "Have you seen those walls? We don't have the equipment." "Then we get equipment," Marcus said. "We can't just leave them in there?" But Helena shook her head. "I don't think breaking it open would help. I don't think they're in there anymore, not in any way that matters." "What does that mean?" I demanded. She pointed at the house. In the morning light, something had changed. The stone looked different, newer, somehow. The edges sharper, the surface more uniform. And there was something else, something I hadn't noticed in the dark. There was a small plaque next to where a door should be, carved directly into the stone. It read, "Unit 7G, Level 447, District 12. That plaque hadn't been there before. I would have staked my life on it. "It's a warning," Helena said quietly. "Samuel was right. This isn't about the past. It's about the future. This house is showing us what's coming." "That's insane," I said, but my voice lacked conviction. "Is it? Think about it, James. Cities are growing. Populations are concentrating. In 100 years, 200 years, where will everyone live? How will we house millions of people in limited space? We'll build up. We'll build in. We'll create efficient housing units stacked on top of each other, hundreds of levels high. And the people inside will call them homes, will think they're living normal lives, until the day they realize they're in boxes they can't escape." Thomas was photographing the new plaque. "This is dated," he said. "Look at the corner. There's a year." We looked. Carved I, then tiny numbers, 2047. "That's impossible," I said. "So is a house with no doors containing living people," Helena replied. "So is a stone plaque that appears overnight. Impossible is what we're dealing with, whether we accept it or not." We spent 2 more days at the site. The house remained silent. No voices, no sounds, nothing. Whatever had happened to the family inside was complete. Helena theorized that they'd experienced some kind of time collapse, living through years or decades in a matter of hours, reaching the point where their sealed environment became undeniable even to them. Hey, we're always in there, she explained. From their perspective, they moved into a new apartment in a crowded future city. Walls around them, neighbors they could hear but never see, living spaces getting smaller as population pressure increased. At first, it seemed normal because it was all they knew, but eventually, the reality of their prison became impossible to ignore. The walls closed in because that's what's happening in that future space contracting, living areas shrinking, until people are literally sealed in stone boxes. But why here? Corbett asked. Why in these mountains in 1871? Because this is where it starts, Marcus said. He'd been quiet for hours, but now he spoke with certainty. Not literally, the cities won't start here. But this is where America is starting to change. The war's over. Industry's coming. These mountains have coal, and where there's coal, there'll be mines. And where there are mines, there'll be company towns, and people will pack into those towns tighter and tighter. This house is a warning about what happens when we prioritize efficiency over humanity, when we treat people like units to be stored rather than souls that need space to breathe. I wanted to argue. I wanted to defend progress, civilization, the march of human improvement. But I kept seeing that plaque, Unit 7G, Level 447, District 12. I kept hearing that woman's screams as her world contracted around her. We took our documentation and left the hollow on the 7th D. The locals watched us leave with the same silent attention they'd given us when we arrived. Samuel Swimmer nodded to Marcus, a gesture of acknowledgement between men who understood something the rest of us were still processing. You'll tell people? Samuel asked. We'll try, Marcus said. I won't listen, Samuel replied. They never do. But at least you can say you tried. He was right, of course. We returned to Philadelphia and presented our findings to the society. The photographs were dismissed as obvious frauds. Helena's geological analysis was called sloppy. Thomas's detailed diagrams were ignored. The testimony from the locals was disregarded as primitive superstition. The official report concluded that we'd encountered an unusual natural rock formation and had allowed our imaginations to run wild. Corbett's career was quietly ruined. He was labeled unreliable, never Guy. Then another surveying contract. Helena was denied tenure at the university and ended up teaching at a women's college in Ohio, her groundbreaking geological work forgotten. Thomas's photographs were confiscated and supposedly destroyed, though I suspect they're in some archive, misfiled or deliberately hidden. Marcus and I kept in contact over the years. He never spoke publicly about what we'd seen, but he worked in his own way, writing articles about urban planning, about the dangers of overcrowding, about the importance of human-scale architecture. No one connected his work to what we'd witnessed in that Appalachian hollow. I've kept silent for 32 years. I've watched cities grow, seen tenement buildings rise higher and higher, watched as people pack themselves into smaller and smaller spaces because economic necessity left them no choice. I've seen the beginning of what the tea house warned us about. And now, in 1903, as I write this for my sickbed, I've learned something that's compelled me to finally record the truth. There's a second house. It appeared 6 months ago in the mountains of western Pennsylvania. Same construction, same impossible sealed structure. Saw me, voices inside. The local newspaper ran a brief story calling it a geological curiosity. But I know what it is. There will be more. The houses are appearing as the warning becomes more urgent, as we move closer to that future where people live in units, in levels, in districts, stacked so high and packed so tight that the walls become inescapable. Here's what I need you to understand. The warning house isn't showing us an inevitable future. It's showing us a possible one. The people inside aren't from a future that must happen. They're from a future that will happen if we don't change course. Every time we prioritize profit over people, every time we build housing meant to pack humans in efficiently rather than let them live fully, Every time we accept less space, less light, less connection to the world because it's affordable or efficient, we move closer to that future. Closer to Unit 7G, Level 447, District 12. The warning house is still there in that Appalachian hollow. I've received reports from locals over the years. Sometimes it's silent for months. Sometimes people hear voices inside different voices, different families, all living in the same sealed box, all experiencing the same slow realization that they're trapped. The house doesn't move through time in the way we think of it. It exists at a junction point where all the possible futures press against the present. The families inside aren't from one specific future. They're from all the futures where we failed the warning, where we've let human beings become units to be stored and warehoused. I'm writing this because I don't want that future. I don't want my children's children to live in sealed boxes, calling them homes because they've never known anything else. I don't want the ampere of those people screaming as their walls close in to become reality for anyone. The warning is simple. Space matters. Light matters. The ability to open a door and walk outside matters. These aren't luxuries, they're requirements for human dignity. When we forget that, when we accept less ooze, we're told we must. We build our own warning houses, one brick at a time. You might read this and think it's the ravings of a dying old man, influenced by primitive superstitions during a youthful adventure. You might dismiss the warning house as a hoax or a delusion. But I'm including with 2020, his account, the one photograph Thomas managed to keep a small print he'd hidden in his personal effects. It shows the house clearly, shows the impossible sealed structure, and if you look very closely at the bottom right corner, you can see the edge of that plaque, Unit 7G. The photograph was taken in 1871. The plaque shows a date of 2047. You do the math. In my final days, I've been thinking about what Helena said in that hollow. This isn't about the past. It's about the future. This house is showing us what's coming. She was wrong about one thing, though. The house isn't just showing us what's coming. It's begging us to choose differently. Every city planner who designs human-scale neighborhoods instead of efficient housing blocks is answering that warning. Every architect who prioritizes light and space over maximizing units per square foot is answering that warning. Every person who demands better, who refuses to accept that less is good enough, who insists that human beings deserve more than boxes to live in, they're all answering that warning. The warning house will stand in that Appalachian hollow for as long as we need it. And God help us, we still need it. I see East cities growing denser, the buildings rising higher, the living spaces shrinking smaller. I see people accepting it because they have no choice, because the alternative is homelessness, because something is better than nothing. But something isn't always better than nothing. But something isn't always better than nothing. Sometimes something is a trap. Sometimes something is a sealed stone box you'll spend your life in, never realizing you're imprisoned until the day the walls close in and there's nowhere left to run. I don't have answers for how we house everyone humanely. I don't have solutions for the economic forces that drive people into smaller and smaller spaces. I'm not a social planner or a political theorist. I was just a young anthropologist who saw something impossible and tried to understand it. But I learned this. The future isn't fixed. The people in the warning house aren't memories from our past or prophecies of certain future. They're warnings about what we could become if we're not careful, if we prioritize the wrong things, if we forget that human beings need more than four walls to truly live. The warning house chose Appalachia for a reason, I think. Those mountains have always been a place apart. Here people live by different rules, where the old ways persist because they work. The mountains teach you that you can't control everything, that nature demands respect, that some things are bigger and older and stranger than your neat categories and rational explanations. The house appeared there because that's where people might still listen, might still understand that progress without wisdom is just a different kind of prison. I'm dying. Within days, perhaps hours, I'll be gone. But the warning house will remain, and the warning it carries becomes more urgent with each passing year. If you read this account, if you look at Thomas's photograph, if you let yourself believe even for a moment that what we witnessed was real, then you have a responsibility, not to spread panic or fear, but to remember that the future isn't fixed, that we have choices, that every decision, about how we build our world matters. Don't let them become units. Don't let yourself become a unit. Fight for space, for light, for the ability to open a door and step outside. Fight for the future where the warning house becomes an obsolete curiosity, a warning we heeded before it was too late. Because if we don't, if we keep building our stone boxes and packing people in tighter and tighter, then one day someone will hear voices in the walls. Someone will realize they're in a house with no doors, and someone will scream as the walls close in, realizing too late that they've been trapped. Along. The warning house is patient. It will wait. It will show us again and again what we're building toward. The only question is, will we listen? I've included coordinates with this account, the exact location of the warning house. I don't recommend visiting it. The locals still avoid it. Till make their signs and warnings. But if you must see it, if you need proof, it's there. Just remember, if you hear voices inside, they're not calling for rescue. They're warning you. They're showing you your possible future. They're begging you across time and space to make different choices. Don't build the boxes. Don't accept the boxes. Don't become the boxes. That's the warning. That's the lesson. That's what those poor souls in Unit 7G, Level 447, District 12 are trying to tell us across the decades and centuries. I hope we're smart enough to listen. I hope we're brave enough to change. Because if we're not, then the warning house won't be a warning anymore. It'll just be practice for what we've built ourselves. Dr. James Wicklow, October 17, 1903, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Edd Undum. Found with the original manuscript, the above account was discovered among the papers of Dr. James Wicklow after his death on October 23, 1903. His executor, unable to determine what to do with such an unusual document, filed it with the Philadelphia Historical Society, where it remained unread in the archives for decades. In 1954, a graduate student researching 19th century why scientific expeditions came across the account. Intrigued, she attempted to verify Wicklow's story. She found William Corbett's surveying records, which included a notation about an unusual stone structure but no details, references to Dr. Helena Morrison's dismissal from the University of Light, Pennsylvania in 1872, officially for conduct unbecoming, but with whispered rumors of scientific fraud. Thomas Chen's obituary from 1889, which mentioned his work as a photographer, but made no reference to the Appalachian expedition. No records of Marcus Webb, though this is unsurprising. Then the poor documentation of African American lives in that era. Most significantly, she found no photographs. If Thomas Chen's images were confiscated, they've never resurfaced. The graduate student attempted to locate the warning house using Wicklow's coordinates. She found the hollow, which matched the description, but reported no structure of any kind, just mountain and forest. She concluded that Wicklow's account was either fabricated or the product of some shared delusion among the expedition members. Her thesis advisor agreed and discouraged further research into what he called obvious fantasy material. The account was refiled and forgotten again until 2019. In June of that year, a hiker in Western Virginia posted images to social media showing an unusual stone structure in a remote hollow. The images went briefly viral before being removed at the request of local authorities, but not before several thousand people had seen them. The structure in the photographs matched Wicklow's description exactly. A sealed stone box, no doors, no windows. And in the comment thread, before the post was deleted, one user claimed to have heard voices coming from inside. Hiker who posted the images has since stated it was all a hoax, a viral marketing stunt for an indie horror film that was never made. The exact location has never been disclosed, but people have started looking, and some of them report finding similar structures in other locations. Sealed stone houses appearing in remote areas, always with the same impossible construction. Some report hearing voices inside. Others claim the structures weren't there one day and appeared overnight. Official sources deny all of it. Natural rock formations, they say. Optical illusions, hoaxes and attentions, eking. But the reports keep coming, and the cities keep growing, and the living spaces keep shrinking. Unit 7G, Level 447, District 12. It was dated 2047. We have time, but not as much as you might think. The warning is still being given. The question is still whether we'll listen.